My son-in-law slapped me in the face and demanded my house keys. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of 1247 Maple Street, casting golden shadows across the breakfast table where I sat nursing my second cup of coffee. At 58, I'd grown accustomed to the quiet symphony of my empty house, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the soft creak of settling wood that spoke of 30 years of memories embedded in these walls. My name is Robert Harrison, and for the past 3 years, this house has been my sanctuary and my prison. It's where Margaret and I built our life together, where we raised our daughter Emma, and where I held my wife's hand as cancer slowly stole her away from me. Every room tells a story: the living room where Emma took her first steps, the kitchen where Margaret taught her to bake chocolate chip cookies, the master bedroom where we whispered our dreams and fears in the darkness. The doorbell's cheerful chime interrupted my reverie, and I glanced at the wall clock. 10:30 on a Saturday morning, right on schedule. Emma and her husband Derek had been visiting every weekend for the past 6 months, ever since Derek lost his job at the marketing firm downtown. At first, I'd welcomed their regular visits. Having Emma around made the house feel alive again, filled it with the laughter I'd been missing since Margaret's passing. But lately, something had changed. I opened the front door to find Emma standing there with her usual bright smile, her auburn hair catching the sunlight just like her mother's used to. Behind her, Derek towered at 6'2", his dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. He wore that expensive leather jacket I'd seen him in countless times, the one that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Hi, Dad!" Emma wrapped me in a warm hug that smelled of vanilla perfume and familiarity. For a moment, the loneliness that had become my constant companion retreated to the shadows. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, squeezing her tight before turning to Derek. "Derek, good to see you." He nodded curtly, his handshake firm but brief. "Robert." There it was again, that coldness I'd been noticing for weeks. Derek used to call me Dad, or at least Bob, but lately it had become the formal Robert, delivered with all the warmth of a business transaction. His blue eyes, which Emma had once described as kind, now seemed to regard me with something I couldn't quite identify. Calculation, maybe? Or hunger? We settled into the living room, where Margaret's favorite throw pillow still occupied its spot on the burgundy sofa. Emma curled up in the recliner that used to be her mother's favorite reading spot, while Derek chose the love seat directly across from me. The arrangement felt oddly confrontational, though I couldn't put my finger on why. "How's the job search going?" I asked Derek, genuinely hoping for good news. Despite my growing unease around him, I wanted my daughter's husband to succeed. Emma's happiness depended on it. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Still looking. The market's tough right now. I'm sure something will come up soon," I offered, but Derek's expression remained stony. Emma jumped in quickly, as she often did when the conversation turned to Derek's unemployment. "Dad, you should see the beautiful neighborhood we drove through on our way here. Those new developments on the east side are gorgeous. Some of those houses must be worth $500,000 or more." I nodded politely, but noticed Derek's eyes never left my face as Emma spoke. There was an intensity there that made me shift uncomfortably in my chair. It reminded me of a hawk watching a mouse, patient, focused, waiting for the right moment to strike. "This old place could probably use some updates," Derek said suddenly, his gaze sweeping across the living room. "The market value could increase significantly with some renovations." The comment struck me as odd. Derek had never shown interest in home improvement before. If anything, he'd always seemed to barely tolerate visiting what he'd once called the suburbs. "I like it just the way it is," I replied firmly. "Margaret and I put a lot of love into making this place our home." Something flickered across Derek's face, annoyance, maybe, or impatience. "Of course," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Though you have to admit, it's getting harder to maintain at your age. All this space for just one person." Emma shot her husband a warning look. "Derek, I'm just being practical, honey," he interrupted, never taking his eyes off me. Your dad's not getting any younger. Eventually, he'll need to think about downsizing, maybe moving into something more manageable. Senior living communities have come a long way. The words hit like ice water in my veins. At 58, I was hardly ready for a nursing home, and the suggestion felt deeply insulting. But it was the way Derek said it, not as a concerned son-in-law, but as someone stating an inevitable fact. As someone who'd given it considerable thought. I plan to live here until my dying day, I said quietly, but with steel in my voice. This house isn't just a building to me. It's my life with Margaret, my memories of raising Emma. It's home. Derek leaned forward slightly, and for just a moment his careful mask slipped. I saw something ugly underneath, a flash of anger, of entitlement, of barely contained frustration. It was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. Of course, he said again, settling back with what he probably thought was a reassuring smile. I just worry about you rattling around in all this space. Emma worries too, don't you, sweetheart? My daughter looked uncomfortable, caught between her father and her husband. I just want you to be happy, Dad, she said softly. Whatever that looks like. But I noticed she didn't contradict Derek's claim that she'd been worrying. And I noticed the way she avoided meeting my eyes when she said it. The rest of the visit passed in stilted conversation and forced smiles. Derek asked more questions about the house, when I'd last had the roof inspected, whether I'd updated the electrical system, if I'd considered what the property might be worth in today's market. Each question felt like a probe, a mapping expedition into territory he had no business exploring. When they finally left, Derek's goodbye was particularly strange. Instead of the usual quick handshake, he clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that seemed almost possessive. Take care of yourself, Robert, he said, his hand lingering longer than necessary. And take care of this place. It's quite an asset. Asset. Not home. Not the place where his wife grew up. Asset. I stood in the doorway long after their car disappeared around the corner, Derek's words echoing in my mind. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, but I felt chilled to the bone. Something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. The man my daughter had married, the man I'd welcomed into our family with open arms, was looking at me like I was an obstacle to something he wanted. And what he wanted, I was beginning to realize, was my home. That night, I sat in Margaret's old chair and stared at the family photos lined up on the mantelpiece. Emma as a gap-toothed 6-year-old, Margaret in her wedding dress, the three of us at Emma's college graduation. Normal, happy memories of a normal, happy family. But normal, happy families didn't have sons-in-law who spoke about their father-in-law's home like it was a business opportunity. Normal, happy families didn't have that cold, calculating look I'd seen in Derek's eyes. I thought about calling Emma, but what would I say? That her husband gave me the creeps? That I had a feeling something bad was coming? She'd think I was a paranoid old man, still grieving and seeing threats where none existed. Maybe I was. But as I locked the front door that night, checking it twice instead of my usual once, I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek's patience was running out. Whatever game he was playing, whatever plan he was hatching, I sensed we were approaching the endgame. I just had no idea how brutal that endgame would be. 3 days later, Derek arrived alone. I was in the garage, sorting through boxes of Margaret's belongings that I'd been avoiding for months, when I heard his car pull into the driveway. The aggressive rumble of his engine seemed louder than usual, more demanding. Through the small garage window, I watched him stride up the walkway with a purpose that made my stomach clench. He didn't knock. The front door simply opened, and his voice boomed through the house. "Robert! We need to talk!" I set down the photo album I'd been holding, Margaret at our honeymoon in Niagara Falls, and walked toward the front of the house. Derek stood in my foyer like he owned the place, a brown leather briefcase in one hand and an expression I'd never seen before twisting his features. Gone was any pretense of family politeness. This was Derek unmasked. "Where's Emma?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "She's at work." This conversation is between men. His voice carried a new authority, like he was the one in charge here. We're going to settle this thing once and for all. Settle what thing? But even as I asked, I felt the hairs on my neck standing up. The air in the room seemed to crackle with barely contained violence. Derek set his briefcase on my coffee table, Margaret's antique coffee table that she'd inherited from her grandmother, and clicked it open with theatrical precision. The charade, Robert. The stubborn old man act. The pretending you don't know what's coming. He pulled out a manila folder thick with documents, and spread them across the table like a dealer laying out cards. Emma and I are tired of waiting. We're tired of you hoarding this house like some kind of shrine, while we struggle to make ends meet in that tiny apartment. I moved closer, trying to read the papers upside down. Legal letterhead. Official-looking seals. My name appeared multiple times across the documents. What is this? This, Derek said with a satisfied smile, is reality catching up with you. These papers show that I'm now the legal co-owner of this property. 50-50 split. You signed them yourself 3 months ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. I never signed anything. Derek's laugh was cold and sharp. Really? Then explain this. He pointed to a signature line where my name was scrawled in what looked remarkably like my own handwriting. The date showed March 15th, Emma's birthday, when I'd been so focused on planning her party that I'd barely paid attention to anything else. My legs felt weak. I sank into my chair, staring at documents that made no sense. I didn't. I would never. You did, Derek said firmly. And now it's time to accept reality. This house is too big for one person. Emma and I need the space. We need the equity. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign these additional papers transferring your remaining half to Emma, and then you're going to find yourself a nice little retirement community somewhere. The room began to spin. Emma knows about this. Derek's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but I caught it. Emma wants what's best for everyone. She knows her old man can't take care of this place forever. Where is she? I want to talk to her. She's not coming. Derek snapped, his patience finally fraying. This is between us. Man to man. So what's it going to be? Are you going to be reasonable, or do we have to do this the hard way? Something in his tone made my blood freeze. Are you threatening me? Derek took a step closer, and suddenly he seemed enormous in my living room. I'm giving you a choice. Sign the papers voluntarily, or I'll make your life so miserable you'll be begging to get out of here. Get out of my house. The words came out stronger than I felt. Your house? Derek's face twisted into something ugly. According to these documents, it's our house now. And I'm not leaving until we settle this. I stood up on shaking legs and walked toward the phone. I'm calling the police. That's when Derek moved with lightning speed. His hand clamped down on my wrist with crushing force, yanking me away from the phone. I don't think so, old man. Let go of me. I tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. You're going to listen to me. Derek snarled, his face inches from mine. You're going to. The slap came without warning. His open palm cracked across my cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side and send shooting stars across my vision. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my burning face, tasting blood from where my teeth had cut my lip. The keys? Derek demanded, his voice deadly calm now. Give me the house keys. All of them. I stared at him in shock, my cheek throbbing. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be the same man who'd sat at my dinner table, who'd married my daughter, who'd called me Dad. Derek, what? The keys! He roared, and I flinched involuntarily. I'm entitled to them. This is my house now, and I want every key you have. My hands were shaking as I reached into my pocket. The cool metal of my key ring felt foreign in my trembling fingers. Derek, please, we can talk about this. We're done talking. He snatched the keys from my hand with such force that the ring cut into my palm. I tried to do this the easy way, but you had to be difficult. Just then, I heard a car door slam outside. Derek's eyes flicked toward the window, and his expression shifted slightly. Footsteps on the front porch, then the door opened. "Derek? Dad?" Emma's voice floated in from the foyer. "I saw both your cars." She appeared in the doorway and froze. Her eyes took in the scattered legal documents, Derek clutching my keys, and me standing there with my hand pressed to my reddening cheek. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God!" she whispered. "What happened?" "Dad, your face." Derek straightened his shoulders, transforming back into the concerned husband. "Emma, honey, your father fell. I was just helping him. He hit me," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, he hit me and took my keys." My daughter looked between us, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Derek? Is that? Did you?" "Emma," Derek said firmly, "your father's confused. He's been acting strange lately, and I think—" "Show her the papers," I said, pointing at the coffee table. "Show her what you brought." Emma moved like she was walking through deep water, her eyes fixed on the legal documents. She picked up the top sheet, scanning it with growing disbelief. This says you own half of Dad's house?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Emma, I can explain." But Emma wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw something that broke my heart more than Derek's slap ever could. She looked away. "Emma," I said desperately, "you have to believe me. I never signed those papers. I would never. I think," Emma said quietly, still not meeting my eyes, "I think we all need to calm down and figure this out." But she didn't ask Derek to give back my keys. And she didn't ask him how my signature had gotten on papers I'd never seen before. She just stood there, torn between the father who'd raised her and the husband she'd chosen, while my cheek burned and my keys remained in Derek's pocket. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, pressing a bag of frozen peas against my swollen cheek while studying photocopies of Derek's documents by lamplight. Emma had left with her husband after an hour of tense, whispered conversations in my driveway. She'd hugged me goodbye, but it felt hollow, obligatory. When I'd asked her to stay, to help me understand what was happening, she'd simply said, "I need time to process this, Dad. Time to process." As if her father being assaulted in his own home was some complex philosophical problem requiring careful consideration. But I couldn't afford the luxury of hurt feelings. Not when Derek now had keys to my house and legal documents claiming half ownership of everything Margaret and I had built together. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. At 6 a.m., I called my old law school roommate, James Chin. We'd kept in touch sporadically over the years. Christmas cards, the occasional phone call when one of us needed legal advice. James had built a successful practice in downtown Indianapolis, specializing in real estate fraud and forgery cases. "Robert? Jesus, it's early. Everything okay?" James's voice was thick with sleep. "I need your help, Jim. Someone's trying to steal my house." 2 hours later, James sat across from me at my kitchen table, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he examined Derek's documents with the methodical precision of a surgeon. His expression grew darker with each page. "This is amateur hour," he said finally, setting down the papers. "Whoever forged these did a decent job on the signatures, but they made critical errors everywhere else. So they are forgeries? Without question. Look here." James pointed to a notary seal. "This notary stamp shows it was authenticated on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. But I know this notary, Sarah Martinez. She was in court with me that entire afternoon on a different case. There's no way she could have witnessed your signature." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by rage. How did Derek even know about that notary? That's what we need to figure out. Tell me everything about March 15th. What were you doing? Who had access to your mail, your personal information? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember. March 15th had been Emma's 32nd birthday. I'd spent the morning running errands, picking up her cake, buying last-minute party supplies. I was all over town that day. The bank, the grocery store, the post office. The post office? I had a package to mail to my sister in Oregon. Birthday gift for her granddaughter. Something nagged at the back of my memory. Derek offered to help me carry things to the car. Said I had too much to handle? James leaned forward. What kind of things? Groceries, party supplies, and… The memory hit like ice water. My mail. I'd stopped to pick up a week's worth of mail because I'd been too busy to check the box. Derek insisted on carrying it inside for me. And you left him alone with it? For maybe 10 minutes while I put away groceries. My stomach churned. Jim, there were bank statements in that mail. Documents with my signature. Even some insurance papers I'd forgotten about. James nodded grimly. Classic identity theft. He had samples of your signature, your account numbers, personal information. With today's technology, creating convincing forgeries isn't that difficult if you have the right source material. But the notary, probably bribed or threatened. Or maybe he found a corrupt notary willing to backdate documents for the right price. We see it more often than you'd think. James pulled out his phone. I'm calling Sarah Martinez right now. The call confirmed our worst fears. Sarah had been contacted 2 weeks ago by someone claiming to be my attorney, asking about backdating a property transfer that had allegedly been signed but not properly notarized. She'd refused, but the caller had been disturbingly knowledgeable about my personal details, my full name, address, even Margaret's maiden name. He's been planning this for months, I said after James hung up. Maybe longer. Looks that way. But here's what doesn't make sense. Why forge documents showing co-ownership? If he was going to commit fraud, why not go for full ownership? The answer came to me with sickening clarity. Because he needs Emma's cooperation. If the papers showed full ownership, she'd know something was wrong immediately. But co-ownership? That looks like something a loving father might do for his struggling daughter and son-in-law. James whistled low. Clever. Manipulative as hell, but clever. He's not just stealing your house, he's destroying your relationship with your daughter in the process. I thought about Emma's face the night before, the way she'd looked at me with suspicion and doubt. It's working. Not if we can help it. James gathered the documents. I'm taking these to a forensics expert I work with. We'll get official analysis of the signatures, the paper, the ink, everything. Meanwhile, I want you to check your credit reports, bank statements, anything Derek might have had access to. That afternoon, I sat at Margaret's old desk in our bedroom, surrounded by financial documents, and growing more horrified by the hour. 3 credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 6 months. Small charges, nothing that would trigger alerts, but enough to establish a pattern of Derek having access to my accounts. More disturbing were the charges on my existing cards, purchases I didn't remember making. A new suit from an expensive men's store. Dinner at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel stays in cities I'd never visited. All small enough to escape my attention individually, but together they painted a picture of someone systematically using my identity. The final blow came when I called my bank about a $2,000 withdrawal from my savings account in February. According to their records, I'd made the withdrawal in person, providing proper identification and answering security questions correctly. Can you tell me what I was wearing that day? I asked the customer service representative. Sir, I wasn't the teller who helped you. Please. Check the security footage notes. What was I wearing? After a long pause. It says here you were wearing a gray suit and a red tie. Is there a problem, Mr. Harrison? I owned exactly one gray suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. And I'd never worn a red tie in my life. But Derek owned several red ties. I'd watched him knot them dozens of times during family dinners. That evening, James called with more devastating news. The forensics expert says the signature forgeries are good, really good. Professional level work. This isn't some amateur with a steady hand. Whoever did this has experience. Derek lost his job at a marketing firm, I said slowly. But before that, didn't Emma mention he worked at some kind of document company? We need to find out exactly what kind of document company. Robert, I have to ask, how well do you really know your son-in-law? I realized with growing horror that I didn't know him at all. I knew he was charming, that he'd swept Emma off her feet, that he drove an expensive car and wore expensive clothes despite being unemployed. But his past, his background, his real character, I'd taken all of that on faith. Faith that was proving to be catastrophically misplaced. Jim, I said quietly, I think I've been living with a predator. And I handed him my daughter on a silver platter. The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. Instead of confronting Derek with what I'd discovered, I was going to let him think he'd won. James had been clear about our strategy during our second meeting. If we go to the police now, Derek will just claim the documents are legitimate and that you're a confused old man trying to back out of agreements you made. We need him to incriminate himself, on record. So when Derek showed up at my door the following Saturday with Emma in tow, I swallowed my pride and played the part of a defeated man. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him, keeping my voice carefully neutral. About the house being too much for me to handle. Derek's eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Robert. Emma and I just want what's best for everyone. Emma squeezed my hand, and I could see relief in her face. She thought we were past the ugliness, that her family was healing. It broke my heart to deceive her, but I had no choice. I'd like to discuss the arrangements, I continued. Maybe we could work out some kind of timeline for the transition. Of course, Derek said magnanimously. We're not heartless. You'll need time to find a suitable place. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the previous 2 days carefully preparing. James had provided me with a tiny digital recorder, barely larger than a matchbox, which I taped under the coffee table. I'd also installed a security app on my phone that could record audio with the press of a single button. I suppose I should give you copies of the house keys, I said, reaching into my pocket. You'll need them if you're co-owner. Derek practically salivated as I handed him duplicates I had made that morning. Thank you, Robert. This is the right thing to do. There's just one thing I'm confused about, I said, settling back in my chair. I honestly don't remember signing those papers. My memory isn't what it used to be, I guess. Derek exchanged a quick glance with Emma before answering. You were very emotional that day, talking about Margaret, about how lonely you'd been. You said you wanted to make sure Emma was taken care of if something happened to you. It was a smooth lie, delivered with practiced sincerity. But I caught the slight tremor in his voice, the way his left eye twitched when he was fabricating details. That does sound like something I'd say, I agreed. Though I still can't picture signing legal documents. Was there a notary involved? Yes, of course. Everything was completely legitimate. Derek's confidence was growing by the minute. Sarah Martinez. Very professional woman. My phone was recording every word. And the papers mentioned something about a 50-50 split of the property value? That's right. Fair and square. Derek leaned forward eagerly. Once we sell the house, you'll get your half of the proceeds. More than enough to buy a nice condo somewhere, maybe closer to that senior center we looked at online. You've been looking at senior centers for me? Just preliminary research. Emma interjected quickly. We want you to have options. But Derek couldn't resist adding. The Sunset Manor place looks perfect for someone your age. They have bingo nights, group meals, medical staff on site 24/7. Everything an elderly person could need. Elderly person. At 58. I bit my tongue and kept recording. How long do you think it might take to sell the house? I asked. Oh, we won't need to sell, Derek said, and I caught the first glimpse of his true intentions. Emma and I will move in here. The place just needs some updating, new kitchen, maybe knock out a wall or two to open up the space. This neighborhood is perfect for young families. Emma looked surprised. Derek, we never discussed. It makes perfect sense, honey. Why pay rent on that tiny apartment when we could be building equity here? Derek's voice took on the tone he might use with a child. Your dad can visit whenever he wants. Holidays, birthdays, special occasions. Visit. In my own home. What about my things? I asked. Margaret's belongings? 30 years of memories? Derek shrugged with casual cruelty. Storage unit, maybe? Most of that old stuff is just clutter anyway. Emma can keep a few sentimental pieces, but honestly, Robert, you're going to need to downsize significantly. I watched Emma's face carefully. A flicker of discomfort crossed her features, but she said nothing. She was going to let him strip away everything that connected me to her mother, to our life together. The thing is, Derek continued, warming to his theme, this house represents a lot of wasted potential. Prime real estate in a desirable neighborhood, sitting here mostly empty while you rattle around by yourself. It's really quite selfish when you think about it. Selfish? I repeated flatly. Well, yes. Emma and I are trying to build a future together. We want to start a family, but we can't do that in our current situation. You have the power to change that, to give your daughter the life she deserves. Derek's voice grew more intense. Don't you want grandchildren, Robert? Don't you want Emma to be happy? It was masterfully manipulative, painting my desire to keep my own home as standing in the way of Emma's happiness and his imaginary grandchildren. I had to admire the psychological sophistication of it, even as it made my skin crawl. I never thought about it that way, I said slowly. That's the problem with your generation, Derek said, his mask slipping further. You hold on to things for sentimental reasons instead of thinking practically. This house is worth at least $400,000, probably more. That's life-changing money for Emma and me. Derek, Emma warned quietly. But he was on a roll now, drunk on what he perceived as victory. I mean, let's be honest, how many years do you really have left to enjoy this place? 5? 10? Meanwhile, Emma and I are in our prime. We could get 20, 30 years of use out of this property. It's simple mathematics. The recorder captured every word, every casual dismissal of my remaining years, every cold calculation about my mortality. Derek wasn't just a thief, he was a sociopath who saw other people as obstacles to his desires. I suppose you're right, I said finally. When would you want to start the transition? Derek smiled like a shark scenting blood. No rush. Take your time finding a new place. A month should be plenty. A month. He was giving me 30 days to abandon the home I built with my wife, to walk away from 3 decades of memories, to hand over everything I owned to the man who had assaulted me in my own living room. That seems reasonable, I said, standing to shake his hand. Derek's grip was firm and possessive. I'm glad we could work this out like civilized adults, Robert. Family is everything, after all. As I walked them to the door, Derek paused on the threshold. Oh, one more thing. I'd appreciate it if you didn't discuss our arrangement with anyone else. Neighbors, other family members, whoever. These kinds of family financial matters should stay private, don't you think? He didn't want me talking to lawyers or getting outside advice. The noose was tightening around his own neck, and he didn't even realize it. Of course, I agreed. Our little secret. After they left, I sat in my living room and played back portions of the recording. Derek's voice filled the quiet house, arrogant and cruel and completely incriminating. For the first time in days, I smiled. Let him think he'd won. Let him make his plans and count his chickens. I had him on tape now, and James was going to make sure the whole world heard exactly what kind of man Emma had married. 2 weeks later, I sat in the Marion County Courthouse, watching Derek strut through the doors like he owned the place. He wore his most expensive suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile confident and predatory. Emma walked beside him, pale and nervous, her hand clutched tightly in his. She still didn't know what was coming. Derek had filed for immediate legal recognition of his co-ownership claim, demanding that I be compelled to honor what he called our verbal agreement about my moving out. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a burgundy pantsuit, had painted me as a confused elderly man trying to back out of legitimate legal arrangements, But James had been busy. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hawthorne," the bailiff announced. Judge Hawthorne was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the kind of piercing gaze that could strip paint. She'd built her reputation on real estate fraud cases, and according to James, she had zero tolerance for con artists. "Your Honor," Derek's lawyer began, "my client seeks recognition of legitimate property rights that Mr. Harrison is now attempting to deny. These documents clearly show." "I've reviewed the documents," Judge Hawthorne interrupted curtly. "Mr. Chen, I assume you have objections?" James stood with theatrical precision. "Yes, Your Honor. Substantial objections based on forensic evidence that these documents are sophisticated forgeries." Derek's face flickered, just for a moment, but I caught it. The first crack in his confident facade. "Forgeries?" Derek's lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to—" "Let me see this forensic evidence," Judge Hawthorne demanded. James approached the bench with a thick folder. "Your Honor, handwriting analysis confirms that while the signatures appear to be Mr. Harrison's, they were actually traced from legitimate documents using advanced digital enhancement techniques. The paper stock doesn't match genuine legal documents from the alleged time period, and most critically, the notary who supposedly witnessed these signatures was provably in court on a different case at the time." I watched Derek's face turn ashen as Judge Hawthorne flipped through the forensic reports. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but he seemed frozen. "Furthermore," James continued, "we have audio evidence that Mr. Derek Martinez admitted to fraudulent activities and made threats against my client." "Audio evidence?" Judge Hawthorne looked up sharply. "Yes, Your Honor. Recorded conversations where the defendant discusses his plans to defraud Mr. Harrison of his property, and makes specific threats about his intentions." Derek shot to his feet. "That's illegal. You can't record someone without consent." "Actually," Judge Hawthorne said dryly, "in Indiana, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. If Mr. Harrison consented to recording conversations in his own home, that's perfectly legal. I'd like to hear this audio evidence." James nodded to the court clerk, who activated the sound system. The recording I'd made in my living room filled the courtroom, Derek's voice crystal clear and damning. "This house represents a lot of wasted potential. It's really quite selfish when you think about it. How many years do you really have left to enjoy this place? 5? 10? Meanwhile, Emma and I are in our prime." Emma's gasp was audible across the courtroom. Her face had gone white, and she stared at her husband like she'd never seen him before. The recording continued. "I mean, let's be honest, how many years do you really have left to enjoy this place? That's life-changing money for Emma and me. A month should be plenty." When Derek's voice smugly declared that old stuff is just clutter anyway, Emma actually recoiled from him physically, sliding away along the bench. "Your Honor," Derek's lawyer said desperately, "my client was clearly speaking hypothetically." "Was he?" Judge Hawthorne's voice could have frozen lava. "Let's hear more." James played the section where Derek discussed knocking out walls and renovating our house, treating my property like it already belonged to him. Then came the most damaging part, Derek demanding secrecy about our arrangement, and warning me not to discuss family financial matters with anyone else. "Classic behavior of someone engaged in fraud," James noted. "Demanding secrecy to prevent the victim from seeking legitimate legal advice." Derek finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I was trying to help Robert transition to a more manageable living situation. Everything I did was out of concern for Mr. Martinez." Judge Hawthorne interrupted. "Are you claiming you had legitimate ownership documents for Mr. Harrison's property?" "Yes, absolutely." "Then explain how your signature appears on bank withdrawal slips from Mr. Harrison's accounts. Withdrawals made while wearing Mr. Harrison's clothing and using his identification." The courtroom went dead silent. Derek's face cycled through confusion, fear, and finally, desperate calculation. That must be some mistake. The bank has security footage," James said quietly. Clear images of you impersonating Mr. Harrison to access his accounts. That's identity theft, a federal crime. Derek's lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how quickly she could withdraw from the case. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Your Honor, Emma said, standing on shaking legs. I need to say something. Derek grabbed her arm. Emma, don't. She yanked free, her eyes blazing. Don't touch me. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I found other documents in our apartment. Bank statements, credit card applications, all in my father's name but with Derek's handwriting. I brought them with me. Derek's face went from pale to green. Emma, you don't understand. I understand that you've been lying to me for months. I understand that you hit my father and tried to steal his house. I understand that you made me complicit in fraud. Tears streamed down her face. Your Honor, I want to help my father in any way I can. Judge Hawthorne accepted the documents Emma offered with grim satisfaction. Mr. Martinez, based on the forensic evidence, the audio recordings, the bank fraud documentation, and now these additional materials provided by your own wife, I'm not only voiding these fraudulent ownership claims, I'm ordering you held in contempt while the district attorney reviews this case for criminal charges. Derek shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking completely. This is insane. That house is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You deserve nothing but a prison cell. Judge Hawthorne snapped. Bailiff, take Mr. Martinez into custody. Derek's lawyer had already packed her briefcase and was heading for the exit. As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Derek turned on me with pure venom in his eyes. You think you've won, old man? You think? Mr. Martinez? Judge Hawthorne's voice cracked like a whip. I suggest you remain silent. Anything you say now will absolutely be used against you in criminal proceedings. But Derek was beyond rational thought. That house should be mine. I worked for it. I planned for it. Some confused old fool doesn't deserve. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and suddenly Derek seemed to realize what had happened. The confident predator was gone, replaced by a cornered animal facing the consequences of his actions. Emma! He called desperately as they led him away. Emma, you have to help me. Tell them I was just trying to help your father. Tell them. Emma didn't even look at him. She was looking at me, tears in her eyes, mouthing a single word, sorry. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. 3 months later, I sat on my front porch watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The same porch where Derek had once demanded my keys with violence and arrogance. The same wooden steps where Emma used to sit as a little girl, feeding crackers to the neighborhood squirrels while Margaret and I watched from the kitchen window. My keys jingled softly in my pocket as I shifted in the old wicker chair, all of them returned, all of them safe. Derek was serving 18 months in federal prison for identity theft, bank fraud, and forgery. The judge at his sentencing hearing had been particularly harsh, noting that his crimes targeted a vulnerable elderly victim, a description that still made me wince, though I had to admit it had worked in our favor. The prosecutor had pushed for 3 years, but Derek's lawyer had negotiated the lighter sentence in exchange for a guilty plea and full restitution. Not that there was much to restitute. Derek's expensive lifestyle had been funded entirely by credit cards and loans he could never repay. The car, the clothes, the fancy dinners, all smoke and mirrors hiding a man with no real assets and fewer morals. The front door opened behind me, and Emma emerged carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She'd been staying with me for the past month, sleeping in her old childhood bedroom while she sorted out the wreckage of her marriage. The divorce papers had been filed 2 weeks after Derek's sentencing. "Morning, Dad," she said softly, settling into the chair beside me. The same chair her mother used to occupy during our quiet morning rituals. "Morning, sweetheart." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Patterson from across the street waved as she retrieved her newspaper. The Henderson kids rode by on their bicycles, backpacks bouncing as they headed to school. "I got a call from the prison yesterday," Emma said finally. I felt my shoulders tense. Derek? He wants to see me. Says he has things to explain, wants to apologize properly. She stared into her coffee mug. His lawyer says he's been a model prisoner, attending counseling, expressing genuine remorse. The protective father in me wanted to tell her to stay as far away from Derek as possible. But Emma was 32 years old, and she'd learned hard lessons about trusting her own judgment. What do you think? I asked instead. I think Derek is very good at telling people what they want to hear. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than they had 6 months ago. I think he spent our entire marriage manipulating me, and I was too in love to see it. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? Emma's voice carried a weight of self-recrimination. Looking back, there were signs. Little lies about his past, stories that didn't quite add up. The way he'd get angry when I asked too many questions about his work or his family. He isolated me from my friends gradually, made me feel like my judgment couldn't be trusted. I reached over and squeezed her hand. He was a professional, Emma. This wasn't amateur hour. James found evidence that Derek had run similar scams in at least 2 other states before he met you. You weren't his first victim. But I was supposed to be your daughter. I was supposed to protect you, not bring a predator into your home. Her voice broke slightly. When I saw those bank statements in our apartment, all those charges in your name, I felt sick. How could I have been living with someone capable of that? The same way thousands of other people get fooled by con artists every year, I said firmly. Derek was charming, attractive, attentive. He made you feel special. That's what these people do. They're experts at finding good people and exploiting their best qualities. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I keep thinking about that day in court, when they played the recording. Hearing him talk about you like you were just an obstacle, calculating how many years you had left like you were livestock. She shuddered. I married a monster, Dad. And I almost helped him destroy you. But you didn't, I reminded her. When it mattered most, when you saw the truth, you chose to do the right thing. That took incredible courage. I should have chosen sooner. Maybe. But you chose when you were ready to see clearly. That's what matters. We watched a jogger pass by, her ponytail bouncing in rhythm with her steps. Normal life continuing around us, the way it always does after the storms pass. Dr. Martinez called yesterday too, Emma said, mentioning the therapist she'd been seeing since Derek's arrest. She thinks I'm making good progress working through everything. Understanding how the manipulation worked, learning to trust my instincts again. How do you feel about that? Hopeful, Emma said, and for the first time in months, her smile looked genuine. Scared but hopeful. I have a job interview next week at the Children's Hospital downtown. Pediatric social work. It feels right, helping families, protecting kids who can't protect themselves. I felt a surge of pride. My daughter was rebuilding her life from the ground up, finding strength I wasn't sure she knew she possessed. Your mother would be proud of you, I said. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears this time. I hope so. I hope she'd forgive me for bringing Derek into our family. Sweetheart, your mother loved you unconditionally. She'd understand that you were trying to build a life with someone you thought you could trust. And she'd be amazed by how you found the strength to fight back when it mattered. A car pulled into the driveway. James, arriving for our weekly coffee meeting that had become a comfortable tradition. He'd refused to accept payment for his legal work, claiming that watching Derek get his comeuppance had been reward enough. One more thing, Emma said as James walked up the front path. I've been thinking about staying here permanently. Not just until I get back on my feet, but staying. This house is too big for one person, like Derek said. But it's perfect for 2-inch. My heart swelled. Are you sure? You're young, you should be building your own life. I am building my own life, Emma said firmly. I'm just choosing to build it here, in the house where I learned what real love looks like. Where I can take care of my father the way he took care of me. James reached the porch steps, briefcase in hand and a knowing smile on his face. Good morning, Harrison family. How are we today? We're home, I said simply, my keys safe in my pocket, my daughter beside me, and my house, our house, solid and secure around us. Margaret's roses were blooming in the front garden, their petals catching the morning light like drops of liquid sunshine. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing, calling the faithful to Sunday service. Derek had been wrong about one thing above all others. A house isn't just wood and stone, brick and mortar. It isn't about square footage or market value or potential equity. A house is the people who choose to fill it with love, the memories that echo in its rooms, the dreams that take root in its soil. It's the place where you belong, where you're safe, where you can be exactly who you are without apology. No amount of fraud or manipulation or violence could ever steal that from me. I was home, and I was staying.